I'm John Little of OmegaShock.com, and this is the Weekend ShockCast for Saturday, October 18th, 2014. We have gone insane. We have one group of people who have thrust their heads firmly in the sand, claiming that there is nothing to fear from Ebola. We have another group that is rapidly growing in size and hysteria. This group will quickly take over everyone else except for the third group. The third group is made up of those who have quietly and carefully chosen a life of preparedness. This third group looks at Ebola as just another of many threats and has made some adjustments to their lives in response. They aren't hysterical, they don't have their heads in the sand, but they are prepared. The question is, which group would you like to be in? Ignoring reality or joining in some kind of group panic has no appeal to me, so I'm pretty much stuck with choosing to be realistic and prepared. So I guess that I'm a captive to the desire for sanity and wisdom. Those of you who have rejected the call to preparedness have chosen to be fearful and hysterical, because that is always the result when people ignore danger. Those who see danger coming and prepare for it can calmly step out of the way while everyone else is frozen in shock and horror. For a while now, I've been ending my articles with this verse, quote, "A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished." Proverbs 22:3. So let me ask you, do you think that now might be a good time to be prudent? There's not a lot of time left. So, what did we talk about this week? This week we talked about geoengineering and the pre-trib lie. We discussed the identities of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. We talked about a last wake-up call from James Wesley Rawls. We took a look at the obscene evil of Ebola, and we described Ebola as the perfect false flag attack. So let's talk about that. On Monday, it was the Ride of the Four Horsemen, geoengineering and the pre-trib lie. As I look back at what I have been writing over the past few months, I'm struck by the thought that I've been talking about something that we've been dreading for almost 2,000 years, the ride of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And that was specifically brought home to me with the spread of Ebola and the 2 interviews that I listened to last night. One of them discussed how geoengineering is destroying the weather system that our ecology depends on. The other was about how the pre-tribulation rapture theory is such a corrosive lie. That last one is important because you can't respond properly to the ride of the Four Horsemen if you believe in a lie. There's a lot of foolishness being handed out by those claiming to be experts in biblical prophecy. Such people are one of many reasons why I strongly encourage you to stay away from seminaries. Such places are full of foolish teachers preaching foolishness to anyone so foolish as to listen. If you have the Holy Spirit and the Bible, you don't need a seminary. Well, Sheila Zielinski is one woman with the Holy Spirit and a Bible, and she interviewed Pastor David Langford on the weekend edition of the Hagman and Hagman Report. You can find it titled Pastor David Langford and G. Edward Griffin on the weekend edition. I provide a link in my article. I am very impressed with Sheila, and her website is weekendvigilante.com. If you feel led to do so, I'm sure that she would appreciate any support that you can give her ministry. Now, the reason why I mention the interview with Pastor Langford is his description of what it took for him to escape the pre-tribulation rapture lie. David was a die-hard follower of this deadly theory, and it took the hand of God to release him. Over the past 20 years, God has also had to reach into my own life and rescue me from more than one lying stronghold of Satan. And that's really what these are, lying strongholds of Satan. And these lying strongholds will keep you from seeing the work of God until it's too late. They will also keep you from seeing the work of Satan, and that's the other bit of what I was listening to last night. Dane Wigington is a man with a mission to stop a deadly evil that is destroying the delicate balance that keeps our ecosystems living and thriving, and he was interviewed on the SGT report. That report is titled Global Climate Geoengineering, the Assault Against All Life on Earth, and I provide a link to the video on my website. Too bad SGT has such an irrational hatred of Israel. Anyway, that interview is powerful and really drives home the idea that the elites are engaged on an assault upon our planet. And the results of that assault will be drought, famine, war, and death. Lots of death. Add the thought that Ebola and global financial collapse are not accidents. Well, I think that you can hear the hoofbeats of the dreaded Four Horsemen. If you can't hear the beat of those fearsome hooves, then it's time to turn off the TV and open your Bible. There's not a lot of time left for sleepy Christians to wake up to the evil that is galloping towards us. On Tuesday, it was the Ride of the Four Horsemen. Who are they? Few ideas have captured the imagination more than the Ride of the Four Horsemen, and most of that imagination is complete foolishness, although some of it is a reasonable attempt at trying to fit the pieces together. Hopefully, the rest of us will ignore foolishness and confine our attempts at understanding to what the Bible actually says. If you play games with the Bible, you are going to wind up in some very hot trouble with the author. As a writer, I don't take kindly to having my words twisted. Multiply that by infinity when you consider that God doesn't like having his words twisted either. It's always better to say I don't know than invite the wrath of God. When it comes to discussing last days prophecy, there are two verses that should strike fear in the hearts of all who consider such things. Quote, "For I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book, if any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life, and out of the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book." Revelation 22, 18, and 19. If you add anything to the book of Revelation that is not there, then you will suffer the terrible things that are described. If you take away anything from the book of Revelation, well, you will suffer eternal judgment. If those two thoughts don't make you afraid, then you are a fool. This means that you must never fiddle with the book of Revelation. That's why I'm extremely careful when interpreting that book. But you didn't come to hear me preach a sermon on interpretation. So let's get to these four horsemen. First of all, are they a what or a who? Well, let's take a look. Or, as the four beasts said to John, come and see. Quote, "And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder, one of the four beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, Come and see. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, Come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. Revelation 6, 1-8. Now I have an important question. Do you see God giving a command to these horsemen? No, you do not. Does it mean that God has not given a command to these horsemen? No, you don't see that either. So there's something of a question mark over all of this, because all that we have is an observation of events by John. But there's one thing that I can say with emphatic clarity. The white horse is not the Antichrist. Those who would make such foolish claims had better go and read Revelation 22:18 again, because that is dangerously close to adding to the book of Revelation. You cannot say that this is the Antichrist. But this doesn't mean that there isn't a connection to the Antichrist. When does the Antichrist come? Probably during the 5th or 6th seal. But I leave that for your own consideration, because I want to get back to these horsemen. What is it that the first horseman is doing? The guy riding the white horse? Building an empire. The next question is, which empire? I personally believe that this is the 7th head of the beast that will be wounded and then revived. However, we won't know for sure until it happens. But if I'm right, then the empire that is being created by the rider of the white horse is the American Empire. And if that is the case, then the horseman has been riding since the mid-1960s, because that is when the American Empire began building. Unfortunately, there is so much analysis connected to my observation that it would take a book to explain it all, so let me give you a short list. The petrodollar. Yep, that was a really short list. And it is the reason why America has been able to conquer the world. And if you need more background on that, go to my discussion on the petrodollar. I have a link to that. Also, did you notice that the times of the Gentiles ended right about that time? That's right, on June 7th, 1967, when Israel captured Jerusalem. And the verse that you need is here, quote, "And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled." Luke 21:24. You can get more on what I say about that in a link that I provide in my document. Now we still have 3 more horsemen. The rider of the red horse is interesting and a little harder to pin down, but this guy is given a Megali Mechaira, or a really big sword, but not a Rumphia. I've talked about the distinction before, but what is curious about the use of Mechaira here is the addition of the word Megale, or great. The Mechaira is a personal weapon, but this one is big, and it is armed conflict, not financial or rhetorical. These are people killing each other, and peace is taken away from the earth. Now let's talk about this black horse. Most people refer to what is happening here as the scarcity of food, but in reality it's about the cost of food, not famine or drought. Of course, the most direct way for food to increase in price is for there to be drought, or some other source of famine. But there are other ways, and we are starting to see the possibilities. For instance, if the financial system collapses and farmers can't buy seed to plant, well, food gets scarce. We could also see the price of oil go up so high that food would also get really expensive. So there are quite a few possibilities here. Then there's the most terrifying horse of all, the pale horse. It kills and destroys a population of 1/4 of the earth. The problem is that we don't know which quarter. Of the total land mass of the world, Africa is 20.4%, North America is 16.5%, South America is 11.9%, Europe is 6.8%, Asia is 30%. So the question is, where does this pale horse ride? My suspicion is Africa, but Africa encompasses less than 1/4 of the world's landmass. So where else would it ride? And no, you do not want to be there when it arrives. The next question is when these horsemen ride. I've pointed to the possibility that the rider of the white horse has been riding since 1967. With all the conflict that we've been seeing since then, it seems like the rider of the red horse has been galloping across the planet as well. But the black horse? That's a good question. But food scarcity has been hitting lots of places over the last few years, and we see that in all these Arab Spring uprisings, especially Egypt. But we may yet see the full effect. Then there's the pale horse. My fear is that this horse has begun its ride and that we are seeing it with the rise of Ebola. I could be wrong, and I hope that I am, but it really is something that we must consider. But let me also leave you with another thought, one that appears to weave through the tale of these horsemen. Have you noticed the human component to all of this? It appears to me that it is human activity that is the root cause of the death and destruction that we see. The white horse conquers an empire, and humans are doing it. The red horse causes armed conflict, and humans are doing it. The black horse describes scarcity, and we can see how humans might be doing it. And the pale horse, well, we do see the fingerprints of evil men all over this dreaded Ebola. We will have to see. The point is that at least one or more of these terrible horsemen are riding the earth today, and this means that you need to take steps to prepare for when they arrive at your door. On Wednesday, it was Your Last Wake-Up Call, James Wesley Rawls. When someone as level-headed as James Wesley Rawls says that the arrival of Ebola in the U.S. is our last wake-up call, you need to pay attention. James isn't a hysterical keyboard warrior with a penchant for tinfoil hats. He's a very solid, down-to-earth guy who has devoted his life to helping us survive the unimaginable, and the amount of knowledge that he has acquired is very impressive. Add to this the fact that he is a true Christian who firmly believes in being led by God through the Holy Spirit. Well, I can't think of many people more important to listen to. Please, pay attention to what he is saying. Every time that I listen to James Wesley Rawls talk, I get the sense of a man of strong character, deep experience, and solid faith. This is not a man given to hysterics or flights of fancy. He doesn't jump at shadows. Couple all that to a wealth of practical knowledge and experience, and you have someone that you might want on your side in a firefight. When it all falls apart, you want a neighbor like James Wesley Rawls. Unfortunately, the closest that most of us will get to him is his website, survivalblog.com. It contains an amazing wealth of information on practical survival as well as insights into James himself. Not many people impress me like this guy does. Well, another impressive guy, Steve Quayle, posted a link to an interview with James Wesley Rawls. I made sure to take the time to listen. It's called Consider This Your Last Wake-Up Call, James Wesley Rawls, and I provide a link to that interview in my article. You can also find a bit more on thedailycoin.org. No one can say for sure that this really is your last wake-up call. There might be a couple more before everything falls apart. The final takedown of America could happen in days, but it could also take months. But I highly doubt that it will take years. I'm certainly not willing to bet my life and the lives of those that I care about on the small chance that the corrupt powers that be will keep their gigantic Ponzi scheme going for more than another year, if that. Nor am I willing to play games with pandemic disease or dangerous vaccines. If you knew that your house would fall into the sea at any time between now and a year from now, you wouldn't sleep another night in the place. You'd move out immediately. Well, you are facing a situation that is far worse, because when everything visibly begins to tip into the abyss, there won't be any safe places to go to. You'll be stuck at the mercy of the fickle whims of evil oligarchs and thuggish minions. So if you've been sitting on the fence wondering whether it's time to take that final move to safety, well, you might want to consider this to be a last wake-up call. Get close to God, get to a safe place, have extra food and water, prepare for the needs of others, and if there's anything left over, buy something tangible, portable, of value like silver or gold. And, to quote James Wesley Rawls, proceed with prayer. You cannot lose if you walk with the Lord. On Thursday, it was facing the obscene evil of Ebola. Because we have incontrovertible evidence that we are being lied to in almost every area by almost everyone, it's hard to know what is true. This has created fertile ground for some pretty outrageous speculation. Of course, we live in an outrageous age, so there is merit to be found in speculating outrageously. But it doesn't help to spend too much time standing at the brink of hysteria, nor does it help to spend time cooking up irrational theories. Reality is bad enough, thank you very much. And this Ebola thing is very much a case in point. It is an absolute obscenity. and we would do well to pay attention to what is real. A friend of mine called me today. We hadn't talked in a while, and it was a chance to get caught up with what we both were doing. And as you can expect, our discussion drifted over to the arrival of Ebola in the United States. And I found myself saying something interesting. I said, I really don't want to believe that what is happening with Ebola is deliberate. If you read what I've been writing on the subject, I've been assuming that Ebola is a deliberate act by the global elites, but that doesn't mean that I want to believe it. If you are a true Christian, you will feel the same way. No one who is good wants to believe that something or someone can be so obscenely evil. And I have noticed people constructing fanciful theories that help keep them from acknowledging the truth about such terrible evil. Unfortunately, fanciful theory is no protection against reality. And as much as it pains me to admit it, there really is an obscene evil at work in our world, and no amount of theory will protect us from it. For instance, Islam really is as evil as it appears to be. And at least 10% of all Muslims really do want you dead, and they don't mind dying if that means that you do too. Why else do you think that Israel has been forced to build a fence around so many Palestinians? And did you really think that Israelis like invading Gaza? Of course not. But it's easier to believe that Israelis are evil than it is to believe that Islam, the religion of death, could be so diabolical. But I've lived in Israel, and I've seen the satanic evil of Islam up close and personal. The same is true for the Ebola scare. No one wants to believe that this disease was cooked up in a bioweapons lab. No one wants to believe that this is being purposely invited into the U.S., and no one wants to believe that it will come knocking on their door and killing people that they love. Acknowledging something like that would mean having to accept a level of evil that is so obscene that, well, you just can't imagine it. That's why we've been seeing all these theories floating about claiming that Ebola doesn't exist, or, if it does, it's not as bad as it sounds. Just like the drowning man or woman who will grasp at anything if it offers even the tiniest hope of survival. But that's not how reality works. And true evil really is as obscene as the Bible says that it is. Satan really is as evil and vile as the Bible describes him to be. And he would jump at the chance to erase 1 billion people from the world with just a single virus. And Ebola is just one of many such deadly microbes. Do you really think that the Illuminati wouldn't use such a virus as a part of their plans to reduce world population? Furthermore, it is an established fact that every dangerous microbe in existence has been weaponized in biological weapons laboratories in the U.S., Russia, China, and who knows where else. And they've modified these microbes to be the most lethal that they can be. You surely knew this, right? And since you know how evil the banksters and their minions are, this means that it would be supremely easy to begin an Ebola pandemic in Africa and make sure that the borders of the U.S. stayed open long enough for it to get here. Why would they want to do that? It's very simple. The financial system is going to collapse, and they can't keep it from crashing much longer. So they need something that will make people afraid of getting together in large numbers to cause trouble. And if the possibility of getting Ebola doesn't keep people home, they can always declare martial law. They also need something that they can point to as being responsible for the crash, and not themselves. Ebola will do that for them. And by the way, thanks to Shihab for the comment that inspired the above thought. Oh, and for those of you who entertain the thought that this Ebola virus isn't real, please understand that the best lies include the most amount of truth possible. Good liars know that they run the least risk of being caught if they tell as much of the truth as they can. Good lies always include lots of truth. Furthermore, if Ebola has already been weaponized, why would they not use it? An operation to create a fake pandemic would be much harder to pull off and more easily unmask than an operation using a real Ebola virus. So, please stop it with the foolish notions that Ebola isn't real. It's real as obscenely evil men and women can make it. Let me pound this point home by pointing to the fact that those in power knew that Ebola was coming. They knew how bad this disease was, and they knew how much damage that it would cause the U.S., and they had a rough idea about when it would reach the U.S., which is why DART teams were notified months ago that they would be needed in October. This isn't rocket science. Even brain-dead bureaucrats could figure this out. Speaking of brain-dead bureaucrats, this doesn't mean that the satanic elites aren't using obscene incompetence to help manufacture the conditions that they are looking for. I once had a contract to write for the Indiana Department of Child Services, what the state of Indiana calls Child Protective Services. The amount of arrogant incompetence that I saw within that organization was positively soul-destroying and beyond obscene. It was an amazing experience that I hope to never, ever repeat. Ever. True evil knows how to use such incompetence to serve its own ends. But let me bring you back to the main point about the Ebola pandemic. Last month I was expecting a massive false flag terrorism attack to divert attention away from a collapse of the financial system. A collapse that could then be blamed on terrorism. But no. It appears that I was looking in the wrong direction, which proves that even I struggle to believe in something that satanic. I believe that this is the false flag attack that we've been looking for. Please, treat the threat of Ebola as real and prepare accordingly. To paraphrase James Wesley Rawls, this may be your last wake-up call. On Friday, it was Ebola, the false flag you've been waiting for. When things fall apart, people get upset and blame the government. If governments don't come to the rescue, people rush out onto the street and tear governments down. Governments don't like this. To stop such threats to their survival, governments declare martial law, which tends to make governments look bad. Governments don't like that either, so they try to use different excuses for martial law, like war. And that was the tried and true method for every government, and frankly there weren't many options to choose from. But in our technocratic society, governments have quite a few new alternatives, like pandemic disease. As I said yesterday, I was expecting the U.S. to launch a false flag attack on itself last month to create the excuse they needed to go to war. Why does the U.S. need yet another war? Because the biggest financial catastrophe in world history is barreling down upon us, and the U.S. government wants to survive that catastrophe. And they know that they'll get blamed for it when it hits. Furthermore, the satanic global elites that are at the root cause of this catastrophe also want to get as much out of the death and destruction that is coming. They want more wealth, more power, and a smaller human population. Think of what is coming as a win-win for the satanic elites. They have most of the world's wealth, but they want the rest, and they also want any survivors dependent upon their every whim. If you think that I'm channeling some dark fantasy, you obviously haven't been paying attention to the past. This is just a repeat of 6,000 years of history. What separates the diabolical elites of today from those of yesteryear are the tools available to manage this situation. Before, they had brute force. Now, they have disease. The next question is, why and how will they use this disease? Please remember that the first goal of any government is survival, and they don't care how many people have to die to make sure that they survive. This means that they will always need to deflect any blame for anything away from themselves and towards something else. When the coming financial catastrophe hits, they will need to be able to say that something else was the cause. A pandemic that is rampaging through America will provide an excellent story for them to tell about why it is not their fault. However, as financial collapse bites deeper into the U.S., tearing away at the social fabric of America, that story won't be enough. People will start rioting and tearing up cities. Law and order will break down. Revolution will be in the air. Normally, government will respond with the imposition of martial law, dusk to dawn curfew, no more than 3 people congregating, all communications shut off, shoot-on-sight orders. But what if there was a pandemic disease? What if a cough or a sneeze could result in a painful death? What if a handshake was as deadly as a gunshot? Please understand that you cannot have a riot if people are deathly afraid of getting closer than 3 feet from anyone else. You can't even have a revolution if people are too scared to meet in groups. Fear is a fantastic motivator. You can get people to do almost anything if you have the ability to create the right kind of fear. And the best kind of fear is one that has the most truth to it. As I said yesterday, this Ebola virus is real, and the threat of a horrible death is real. Otherwise, they would have chosen a different disease. Furthermore, the elites have managed the situation in such a way that this real threat is available to them when the financial collapse occurs. In fact, they will probably use Ebola to initiate a controlled demolition of the U.S. financial system. Think of Ebola as just another version of World Trade Center Building 7, the one that just happened to fall straight down on its own footprint because of burning office furniture. Those of you who are longtime readers know that my favorite quote on politics comes from FDR. Quote, "In politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way." Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The stink of obscene politics is all over this dreadful Ebola virus, so it is easy for me to say that this is a planned event. To paraphrase Roosevelt, whatever happens with Ebola, you can bet that it was planned that way. And if you need to understand who is doing the planning, all that you need is a question that is thousands of years old. Cui bono? Who benefits? There are a lot of people out there talking about the benefit to pharmaceutical companies, but they're missing the big picture. Those who benefit the most from Ebola are the global elites and their pet governments. The question is whether you want to play a role in their plan or opt out. Do you want to participate in this obscene drama? I don't, which is why my wife and I have done our best to prepare for what is coming. How about you? I truly hope that you'll be ready for this. That's a link. There's not much time left. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. Proverbs 22:3. This has been the Weekend ShockCast for Saturday, October 18th, 2014. I'm John Little of OmegaShock.com, and I hope you have a good weekend.